The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining part 3 of our 4-part Transformation 2015 webinar series today. My name is Sarah Passero, and I'm here with AIS Media VP of Design and Development, Sean Jones, who will be hosting this exciting webinar titled Mobile First Digital Marketing.
Hi, this is Sean Jones, your presenter for today. Sarah said I'm the Vice President of Design and Development, and today we're going to be covering mobile first digital marketing. Before we get started, we just want to do a quick poll to kind of get an idea of who our audience is here. Some of you will start seeing a poll open up. Essentially what we'd like to know is of the audience that's here, how many would consider themselves in B2B or B2C marketing, or where their companies are really oriented towards marketing towards a B2C or a B2B audience. Give everybody just a few moments there. All right, so it looks like about 57% of the individuals that are on the phone right now are, they consider themselves marketing towards a B2B audience base. Just under a quarter of you guys are in the B2C market, while 19% of you don't feel that you market to either B2B or B2Cs. So all of that's helpful for us just to kind of get an idea about who we're going to be aiming some of this to. Now, as we discussed today, today's agenda is primarily going to focus on mobile first digital marketing. But in addition to covering mobile first digital marketing, we're also going to be featuring live polls and surveys, one of which you've just participated in. This will allow you to see some real-time results from today's attendees, just to get an idea about where you might fit in relation to some of your peers that are on the phone. We'll also be doing a QA at the end of the presentation, but as we go through the process, feel free to type any questions that you might have during the call, and we'll try to answer those as we go. Lastly, we'll be wrapping with a special offer for our attendees today, and for those of you that are multitask-centric, we'll also be on Twitter throughout the presentation, so if you have any questions, feel free to tweet us at hashtag AISMediaEDU, and we'll answer those questions throughout the presentation. For those of you who aren't familiar with AIS Media, our home office is located in Atlanta, Georgia, and we specialize in digital marketing strategy, user experience design, lead generation and sales, digital marketing, specifically around SEO, PPC and email, and conversion rate optimization. We have a partner location in the Dallas area. There we primarily focus on CRM selection and implementation, marketing automation from setting up the implementation program all the way through developing the strategy for usage, the sales process alignment, content journey mapping, and lead management. Over the last 5 years, our work has garnered more than 37 awards across areas such as site design, UX design, usability, email marketing, and campaign management. And we're proud of this work that we've done for clients, some of which are in attendance today, and that ranges from clients such as Wake Forest Innovation, the Baptist Medical Center, to AT&T, to Emory Healthcare, as well as some that are local to the Atlanta area, such as the DeKalb County School System. Since early 2000, our strategies, methodologies, and content have been featured throughout media outlets such as CNBC, Forbes, Today's Show, and more. Most of that content and methodology has been refined over the years, all of which is going to go into what we're going to be discussing today. So a common question that we get asked, not just by clients, but prospects or people we meet and engage with, are, what do we most provide our clients? And that's best summarized as lift. Lift to brand awareness, buyer engagement, sales performance, all while delivering measurable, meaningful results. Throughout this series, my peers here have covered a variety of topics, and today's topic, again, we're going to be focused on mobile-first digital marketing, and that's going to touch on a little of everything that you see here, everything from strategy and design through the importance of analytics and reporting as it relates to your mobile-oriented audience and how you can best market to those individuals. So something to consider, particularly as it relates to this new world, is that it's not just mobile first, but really what we're talking about is mobile screen first. It's important to understand, particularly for your marketing team, from the writer and the designer to your developers, that the multi-screen revolution has impacted digital marketing from start to finish. Everything from your web presence to your emails to your landing pages and CTAs all need to be oriented around the support and growth of the multi-screen user base. According to PricewaterhouseCoopers, 70 to 80% of all purchase decisions are now directly influenced by digital channels. So as compared to even just a few years ago where marketing and radio or TV and radio played such a huge part, while those channels still make a difference, social media distribution, email marketing, etc., are all moving users towards those decision bases. So when you combine this with the continued growth of tablets over PCs, and you can see the exponential growth we've seen in just the last couple of years, and the general growth of mobile usage versus desktop usage, it's hard not to imagine the need for your marketing to meet the needs of this new audience. The need for this shift is probably best summarized by Avi Don of Forbes. Too many companies think in terms of digital marketing. Instead, they should be thinking in terms of marketing in the digital world. So when we consider this, I'd like to ask another poll here. How many of you are already considering your digital strategy and your mobile strategy as it relates to this new environment? All right. Got about half of you all that have voted so far. Just a few more people. And it looks like so far about 50% of the audience so far has not really started. And then we've got, a few that have just barely gotten into it, but 35% who've engaged in, in at least sometime greater than 30 days in putting their strategy together. However, for the 52% that have not already begun their strategy, part of what we talked today, that should help jumpstart you on some of the things that you want to consider as it relates to your mobile needs and your mobile marketing strategy for this new audience. Now, today's audience, they're going to use a variety of devices to accomplish their goals. And search is one of the most common ways that consumers move from device to device. Of those polled, 90% of users use multiple screens sequentially. So they're going to start on a mobile device, some type of tablet or smartphone, they'll move to a desktop, and vice versa. And if you look at the stats here, 81% do this just in general browsing, but 67% do this while shopping online, 46% while managing finances, and 43% while just planning a trip. So before making a decision, what this really shows us is that any type of, whether it's a request for information or other conversion, is going to be dictated by the user as they migrate through this device. Essentially, the user is going to move from device to device along the quote-unquote path of least resistance in order for them to make their final purchase or decision. So for those of you that are on the B2C side of things, it's important to recognize that your users, while they may start on a smartphone, 65% of them are going to start there, make sure they can find what they need, and then they're going to move to a desktop in order to finish their transaction. Similar results for the B2B market. Compare that to users who start on a desktop. Very rarely do they move to a mobile device in order to complete their transaction. However, what that essentially means is that at least 55% of all consumers who are using mobile to do research are planning on making a purchase within an hour. So if we go back and look at this, that 65% mobile audience that then moves to a desktop or moves to a PC, that audience is going to make a transaction of some nature within the next hour. So if you're not serving that audience, they're going to be served by somebody else. Ultimately, what's important to remember is that regardless of platform, what device resolution, consumers want a consistent experience across the devices. It needs to be something familiar. They don't want to get bounced or jostled from one user experience to another. So another quick poll question here, and this is particularly important for any of you, whether it's B2B or B2C, is how confident are you that your current site, whether it be a landing page, website, or marketing campaign, best serves your audiences across all of these platforms? All right. So it looks like, yeah, it looks like the results, you know, I think for the majority of you, you feel that you're probably not serving those audiences as well as you could and that there's room for improvement. Excuse me. The good news is we're going to cover some of those methods today. And of course, you know, this is a great time, particularly as the technology has evolved, to start really embracing this from a company and a corporate culture perspective to meet those needs. So here's your final results. 38% feel they're meeting those needs across platforms and devices, but 63% of the audience today doesn't feel that they're meeting those needs as well as they could. So we appreciate your feedback there. So ultimately, when considering this, what all this really means, particularly when you look at the stats, and there's a ton of industry stats out there, is that the multi-screen centric marketing is now a mandate across companies. Companies are starting to realize that everything from content, images, copy, videos, to their website, to search implementation, to email, to social media, it all needs to embrace a multi-screen or mobile-centric type of marketing platform. Now, one of the primary drivers for this is essentially context-focused marketing. Now, context-focused marketing emphasizes delivering the right content to your users on their selected devices regardless of platform. And in order for your marketing to be effective, you really need to know and understand your audience and their preferences. So what this means is you need to know, what devices are most used by your audience. Are they on iPhones? Are they on Android? Is it predominantly laptops? Is it BlackBerry? Where are those users bouncing? How many users bounce? Are they sticking, or are they just giving up because they can't find what they need? Worse, are you delivering a message on a particular platform or to a user base that really doesn't exist? It's important to use insights to understand this customer journey from origination, the time they open the email to go to your landing page or to your website, all the way through the conversion process. Now, a good example of this is a recent client that we did some analysis for. And in this case, we took a quick look at their analytics and their mobile usage and their desktop usage, and we found that the vast majority of their audience is all new, 85% new visitors. Now, for a lot of people, they're going to say, hey, that's great. 85, if we're gaining new customers all the time or new visitors, that's exactly what we want. The problem is, when we started looking at what those audiences were looking at, we found that 95% were looking in one of two categories, neither of which were categories the client was even aware were important to their users. On top of that, we found that nearly 40% of their audience were on mobile devices. Now, ultimately, this is really critical to the client because they very quickly realized that most of the traffic being driven was mobile-oriented. They were coming to topics that they weren't even aware of or really were interested, or that they were best serving, and that's what was driving that bounce rate that they were seeing later on. So just a baseline understanding of your analytics is really going to be helpful, not just for your marketing managers and your content developers, but for your designers, all the way through your executive team, to ensure that you're serving that audience as best possible. Another good example of just how to gather this data is heat maps. Heat maps are going to help illustrate everything from where the eye roams, where does the mouse roam, what's the scroll map like, are they really focusing on certain areas of your site versus others. It really helps correlate data that you find as it relates to your analytics. So again, just another quick question for those of you that are on right now. How many of you are currently using heat maps to measure what your audience engagement is like on your landing pages, your emails, or your website? All right, so about 3/4 of you have voted so far. And it looks like for the majority, I think we can safely say that the majority of you aren't using any type of heat map or tools similar nature to measure your audience engagement. 80% are actually saying that this is not being used. So this is what's really a low-hanging fruit when it comes to optimization and content delivery for your mobile audience. These type of tools can be used across multiple mobile devices, whether it's a tablet, a smartphone, and to be able to measure that against your desktop usage is really critical to know what is your mobile audience doing versus your desktop audience to ensure that they're seeing your CTAs and calls to action as you wanted them to. Now, not just heat maps and not just general content delivery, but something to consider as well is, especially for contextual content delivery as it relates to the mobile audience, is social media rules. Delivering the right content in this format, particularly so that it can be easily digested by your social audience, is really critical. So 60% of social media time is not spent on desktop computers, but smartphones and tablets. I'm sure most of you are familiar with Pinterest, even if you don't use it directly. It's exceptionally image-centric. And one of the things that we see most is clients that may have embraced Pinterest for serving their social audience then drive them to pages that have no context for them to be able to relate to once they reach that page. So they've got a great content distribution model. They've got a great social media audience. They click the image. They go to the website. There's no call to action. There's no relevant copy. The pages aren't optimized for use, or worse, the user that's on a mobile device can't even see the content that's on those platforms. So what this comes down to is really one goal: the right content, the right audience, and the right format across devices. And what this means is really being aware of who your audience is, what their awareness is, and how far through the purchase or conversion process they are as it relates to your content. And this is applicable across devices. And so essentially what this requires is, as a content marketer and as a developer or as a designer, is to understand your user as they're through this process to know what type of content best serves their needs at any given time. So one more quick poll question, and this is usually pretty telling. Who here has conducted a content review or a gap analysis to ensure that the content you're delivering your users really fits the device that they're already on? Okay. A little more than half of people have voted so far. So at about the 3/4 mark, it looks like pretty much overwhelmingly, close this out, overwhelmingly, 68% say that no evaluation has been done to determine whether or not the material being delivered to their audience is really formatted for this mobile environment. So ultimately what that means is that for the 28% of you that have, at least you're starting to understand what type of content's being used by that audience and is it best served. Again, for the 60+ that haven't done this, this is a great exercise to help determine, is the material you're delivering your audience across mobile devices really working? So if you're marketing to these individuals and you're sending content out or data out, or you're asking for feedback or sign up or trying to sell a product, if this hasn't been done and we're not measuring what the performance of that is, it's really going to start falling flat, and it's hard to know what should we be changing as we move forward as it relates to that audience. Now, something to consider, and this is coming up by mid-2016, not only do we have to start being concerned about mobile device and platform, but marketers are going to start seeing that location is essentially the new cookie. This is really going to help represent a way to track movements of consumers from just location, where they are through a given day, across various media types, everything from Apple Pay and other NFC payment options, combined with geolocation, is going to allow a marketer to see what are my users doing any given day and what are they interacting with. So if you're not already embracing the mobile technology and the mobile world, this is something that's coming up early to mid next year that you're also going to have to start considering. So if you're already behind the curve, now is really the time to start looking at part of what we're discussing to make sure that you don't fall even farther behind the curve as we start talking about location-based marketing, geofencing and items of that nature. So what does all this really mean to you as a marketer or as a designer or as a developer? You have to understand your audience device preferences. You need to be reviewing your analytics. If you haven't already implemented analytics, web trends, something along those lines, it needs to be done sooner than later. If you're not using heat maps, that's a great place to start as well. Start measuring what are your users actually doing on these devices. Review your site data. And by site data, we just don't mean traffic. It's everything from what are your tablet users actually doing? Is that driving your bounce rate? Do you have a high bounce rate on mobile? Are you finding that your mobile audience is not coming to your website at all? Is your tablet audience converting higher than your desktop audience? A deep look at analytics and a deep look at your heat maps is going to help you understand how to best market to those audiences so that you can serve them. In addition to this, it's understanding that clear messaging and CTAs are important across devices. So you may remember when we asked everybody, have you evaluated your content across devices? A lot of people said no. Well, if you're not verifying that your content and your CTAs are viewable or relevant on a particular platform or device, it's going to be very difficult to ensure that your marketing message really meets success to those audiences on their device or chosen platform. Lastly, avoid clutter. And we're going to talk about a little bit about this as we move into our next conversation piece, which is design and optimization considerations. So given the need for a multi-screen experience, I think looking at the stats, looking at the trends, we can all agree that we need to be able to serve individuals across devices, across platforms. So before we get too deep in this, how many of you have already started working on a responsive or adaptive framework for your website or marketing campaigns or landing pages? We've got about 3/4 of the attendees have voted now. All right, so pretty interesting results. It looks like, at least a third, you've already tackled that. May not be measuring it yet, but at least you've tackled that phase. Another third, they're basically, you're in the process now, so it's something that you're moving forward with. And then there's about another third that either haven't done it or you're not sure. For that third, I'd say it's definitely critical to raise your hand, if not to us, at least to somebody internally to find out, have we even started this? Is our site adaptive? Are we serving the mobile market, or how can we? That's going to be very critical. So again, thanks for the feedback as we go through the polls. So one thing to consider for mobile, the mobile need here, and a common methodology for serving that need is responsive design, which has been a hot word for the last couple of years. Essentially, this is an approach to web creation that allows you to make one flexible layout, utilize common images and style sheets, all driven by media queries. All that means for the layman is that it allows you to build one basic website that fluidly changes based upon the visitor screen size. So an example of this is the work that we did not too long ago for Wake Forest Innovations. Essentially, we built one single responsive framework We implemented this across 5 of their corporate entities, all within 30 days. Now, this type of rapid development was only possible due to, one, understanding who their target audience was and what their platforms were, and then making use of a responsive design. It allowed us to be able to target their mobile audience, their tablet audience, etc., all while developing a single corporate entity that we could push across each of these. We took a variety of awards for this. The client was ultimately very happy. And again, it's the responsive framework is really kind of the low-hanging fruit and the easiest implementation for a lot of companies to be able to serve those needs. Another option, and this is something that for the more either technologically advanced groups out there or companies or those with some deeper pockets, are really the adaptive frameworks. And the adaptive framework allows you to provide very specific display options based upon fixed sizing and fixed devices. So Mashable is a good example of this. CNN is a good example of this. Essentially what they're doing, and this is a great illustration, is they are serving a very unique experience to their desktop audience, to their tablet audience, to their phone audience through an adaptive process. The screens don't necessarily shrink and scale, but what's presented is unique to that audience and their needs. While the responsive audience is basically given one platform and the screen scales and adapts based upon what the device is. Both have their pros and cons, and there really is no right or wrong. For the adaptive option, essentially your design is often simplified. You're designing specifically to the individual device need, which makes it easier sometimes when you're designers or developers, because you can specifically choose where content's going to be at any given time. Load speed is typically going to be much faster. Your media queries, your jQuery, et cetera, all those type of queries are going to be much more streamlined so that you don't have a lot of burden on devices that don't need to use them. Maintenance is typically cut down because, again, you're serving maintenance to a very specific audience at a very specific time based upon their need. Responsive design. This is one layout. It's going to work across almost all screens. Can be a little more difficult to design or make. Essentially what it requires is a little more time up front to really determine where your CTAs need to be and what your content's going to be to serve your given audience. The site can be a little slower, and it can have a little more overhead, so it's really important when choosing a development team or development partner to make sure that they understand what's required as it relates to site speed and measurability. And we're going to talk a little bit about that moving forward here. Essentially, the decision between adaptive and responsive is really less important than ensuring that your site, landing page, or marketing campaigns are mobile friendly. If they're not at least mobile friendly, you're missing out on a huge part of the market, and that's what needs to be resolved first, even above the considerations between the two primary options. Now, we saw this slide earlier, and just looking back at this, remember again that your audiences are moving from device to device and platform to platform. This is why these type of frameworks are critical. And it's really essential as you go through this that you're talking about things like not just contextual information, your content, but your CTAs. Just displaying your site without this consideration for this framework is not enough. If you're not focused on where your calls to action are placed within those options, you're going to be missing out on valuable conversions. And again, 65% of people move from a smartphone to a desktop. So a great example of this, if we look at Uber, you look at their smartphone version, you look at the desktop version, they've got an adaptive framework that's set up, but on each of these, they're most focused on providing one or two primary calls to action. Either sign up to be a driver or get somebody to drive you around. In both cases, they've ensured that their calls to action are easily seen on both those platforms so that regardless of what device they start on, they're served the right calls to action at the right time on the right device. So ultimately, the failure to meet the needs of the multi-screen individual can be the difference between a conversion and an abandonment. And if you're not optimized for mobile via either responsive or adaptive design, you risk losing consumers right by the outset. And it's important to bear in mind that the decision to make a purchase may not always be made on a mobile device. but the decision to not make a purchase could definitely be made. And again, a great example of this is if you pull up the Uber site and all you could see was the picture and the 2 calls to action weren't viewable on your phone, what would you do? You're instantly going to have to make a decision of, do I want to spend time trying to figure out what am I supposed to do, or am I just going to go somewhere else? So it's critical to make sure that as you're going through the design process and you're making the consideration for landing pages, email, etc., that be reviewed. Now, all of this can really be fairly easily tested, and Google's been kind enough to develop a mobile-friendly test. We've used this for clients. We use it for ourselves. Another quick poll question for those of you on. For those of you that have already gone through the development of a mobile site or a mobile landing page, mobile marketing campaign, are you using Google to determine whether or not your site's what they consider quote-unquote mobile-friendly? Okay. About 60% in. It looks like overwhelmingly the group right now, it looks like the majority of you have not used this tool or aren't doing mobile validation. So something I would ask you to consider, and this is really important, 82% said no, we've not verified that we passed Google's test to see whether or not the site's mobile friendly. Something I would encourage you to do is to use the tool, because coming April 21st, your site passing this test is going to be critical to your search ranking as it relates to Google. What they're going to do is they're going to start tagging sites that pass the mobile-friendly test, and you're actually going to be given a higher search ranking against sites that don't pass the test. Not only that, but they're going to be tagged as mobile-friendly. They're now essentially going to tell users on mobile devices, yes, this is a site you want to visit on your device. So failing that test, not only are you not going to get that tag, but your site's going to be deranked, or at least moved down in rank. So it's a free test. It's something that Google provides. It's something, if you have difficulty or something we can certainly help with, so feel free to reach out. But if you're not already doing that type of mobile validation, I'd encourage you to start. Now, we've talked a lot about sites and landing pages, but we don't want to forget that, marketing is not just about the website. Email marketing is also critical. We do the same thing, the same type of multi-format marketing needed when it comes to our emails. And your website and landing pages, given that they're just a small part of your overall marketing strategy, you can't leave email out. And a great example of this, and these are recent stats from one of our clients, we did a review of their past mail campaigns. We looked at the platforms their audiences were on. We looked at their analytics. And what we did was we developed a responsive email framework for this client. And within the first quarter, that new framework and that new email format generated open rates 23.45% higher than industry average. And their click rate went up 73.91%. So the client was thrilled. Same essential copy, same basic pictures. The only real difference is we made sure that what we were delivering was the right type of format to the right audience on the right platform. Another great example, and this is somebody that we just recently started working with, the same methodology was used. We reviewed their material, we looked at their analytics, we looked at their heat maps, we checked all their mail stats. We found that the vast majority of their mobile audiences were not being engaged properly. So we made some small changes, gave them a new responsive mail template to use. Their open rate increased by 91.17%, 30% open rate, which is well ahead of industry average for their industry. Even more impressive, their click rates went up better than 357%. They have a 8.9% click rate to the list right now. Again, nearly, it's 3.5 times what the industry average is for their particular industry. So when we talk about the mobile needs and analytics and review and your marketing, it's important that all of those items be reviewed from start to finish, from email to landing page to website. So just a final poll question here. For those of you that may have a adaptive or responsive site, how many of you are doing the same thing with your emails? Are you also targeting your emails in a mobile fashion to make sure that you're getting the proper engagement? All right. So it looks like, in this case, even if you have a responsive or an adaptive site, the rest of your digital marketing may not really be set up for this new mobile or multi-screen world. 75% said they're not sending anything out that's really targeted towards those audiences. So the question to really ask yourself is, if those simple changes were helpful for both those clients, couldn't they also be helpful for you as well? So before we wrap up here, we just want to cover a couple of top mobile-first digital marketing considerations. Again, it is a multi-screen world now. If you're not marketing accordingly, you're missing out on a large part of that market. Site design increasingly drives digital marketing performance, and not just for, when we say site design, it's not just for websites, but it's for landing pages, it's for email, it's across your marketing materials. Location will soon be the new cookie. So for those of you that have not already fully embraced this kind of multi-screen world, that's something that's going to be coming up. So you don't want to fall even farther behind the curve. Number 4, mobile-friendly design is going to improve your search ranking and your conversion. For those of you who have a mobile site but haven't validated it, I'd encourage you to start sooner rather than later. April, frankly, it's not that far out. If you find that your site doesn't pass that test, that's something that can sometimes easily be fixed, but can also be exhaustive. It's going to measure things such as font size, CTA location, button placement, swipe speed, content delivery speed. All those things are going to impact whether you pass-fail. And lastly, does your content strategy really cater to the new customer buying journey that may start on a mobile device and move to a desktop or vice versa? Lastly, for everybody on board or everybody that was on the webinar, particularly for those that have maybe not started this process or have only partially done it or haven't really measured your success, we'd like to offer everybody a multi-screen experience assessment. Essentially what we're going to look at is your multi-device capability and compatibility. Are you serving your website, landing pages, or email to the right audience in the right fashion? What's the site or landing page load speed? That's critical for Google across mobile devices. CTA analysis. Again, going back to the Uber reference, if those CTAs couldn't be seen on a mobile device, they're going to lose audience. The same thing is applicable to ourselves, to our clients, same thing to you and your business. Topography and readability. Another key item for Google in their usability test for mobile. If the fonts are not sized appropriately, if they're spaced too closely together, line height's not right, etc. All those things can lead to a failure. So if this is something that everybody is interested in, just please feel free to reach out, 404-751-1043, or you can email us to request the assessment at info@aismedia.com. Outside of that, I certainly appreciate everybody's time today. I thank you for your polls. At the end of the webinar, you're also going to be provided with just a couple quick questions just in terms of your experience today. So within the next 24 hours, we'll be posting this live online. So look for an email letting everybody know that the webinar, the broadcast is available to you. And I thank you for your time again and hope you all have a good rest of the day and a good rest of the week.